Here we are in the front of the 05 Plus Toyota Tacoma. What we're looking at is where the factory location of a battery was, and you can see that it's been removed. I decided to remove the batteries from the front of the truck, or adding dual batteries in the front, just because it created a lot of tightness here with the oil filter. The access to the front headlight was tight, and then also just extra weight on the left front side of the truck. If you add any kind of accessories like a bumper or a winch, it's just going to exaggerate that excess weight forward. So where we'll start is with what we did is remove the battery, relocated it to the bed in our dual battery relocation box. And so what we've taken is a black wire with a red stripe that was on the battery, removed that wire, and also the accessory wire that was on the battery that went to the factory fuse block. We joined those together on the battery switch, and then also we added a jumper stud off the battery switch that I can turn on the one position, and then the ground stud. Those are just basically for jumping purposes, because your batteries are in the bed, and if you ever did have them both go dead, it'd be easier to jump them up here than trying to run cables to the back of the bed, front of the bed actually, to the batteries. Also up here you'll see where I just tied in the factory body stud. I also ran a stud from the jumper to the ground stud, and then there's the factory ground wire that goes back to the engine block, and then I also joined another ground wire that goes from the back of the block to the battery box in the back of the truck. And then up here you'll see one of my accessory power modules. We'll talk about that in a different video. That's basically for some lights and so on and so forth. So how we wired the alternator, this is the off-road TRD off-road package with the tow package, so it's got the factory 130 amp high output alternator. I've taken the black wire with the blue stripe, which is the output wire for the alternator. I removed it from the factory fuse block that it went to 130 amp fuse, and I set it to a manual trip breaker so that I can disconnect the charge of the alternator for whatever reason. If I was running through water, or the alternator stopped charging, or was getting hot or whatever, I could just kick that breaker and it wouldn't charge, wouldn't put out any charge. It comes out of that breaker and then goes down through I ran it along the factory wiring harness. Tried to keep it neat and clean like Toyota does, so that there's no wires rubbing on the exhaust manifolds and then the cats. And it just runs along the main harness there, down by the starter where I tie into the go through the frame. You also notice on the when you have the add the battery isolator in the back, it's in the bed also in the box, is there's an exciter wire for all alternators that basically kicks the alternator on. It senses voltage and kicks the alternator on. And you have to splice into that wire. It's a green wire from Toyota, and I used a fuse on it. That way it's fused, and you can pull that fuse and you can disengage it also if you needed to, or if it would let you know if there's a problem by it blowing that fuse and it popping you could understand that there's an issue going on and you need to take care of it. This wire goes back to the battery isolator in the back of the truck. I use 2-gauge Encore wire, 2-strand, and it's also shielded marine grade. It's got a lot of strands in the wire itself, so it's real pliable. And I ran that down along the wiring harness also and tied it in nicely into the frame, and then it goes all the way back. You can see here where I've taken the main battery wires and joined them at the starter. That's where you always bring a main wire in, is the starter, and I've joined them in right there. And I've also ran my battery isolator wire, goes up through that wire loom up to the breaker up top, and then I actually ran them through the frame here. I put some Safeguard rubber on there. It's about the cleanest way I could see to avoid the heat of the cats and the exhaust, and get it to the back. Like I say, it's keeping everything with wiring, keeping it tight, and so nothing pulls on anything is what keeps you from having failures later on. And so what we've done is we've ran it down the frame into the channeling, the small portion of channel of the Toyota frame, and then it came out of the frame
right here, as you can see, we've come out right there with some more. I run plenty of chafe guard just to keep everything from rubbing, wire from rubbing on metal. And then we've joined in right here, following the fuel lines. And then all the way in the back. And we go up through there. You can see where I've ran my wiring up along the fuel fill, and that's where it cuts into the bed. I've kept everything up out of by the frame rail. It gets real tight in there, but you can run it through there. And I always used 2-strand, 3-strand. For my exciter wires, I use 2-strand Anchor. It's marine grade. It's got a lot of strands in it. And actually with electricity runs through the outer portion of wire. So the more strands a wire has, the better, and plus it's more pliable. It's marine grade, so it doesn't corrode as easily, and it's more expensive, of course. So here you can see where the wires came through the back, the bed, 2 1-inch grommets. This is the main power and ground wire, and then it's kind of I use pretty much welding cable, heavy duty. It's actually marine grade Honda wire, and I used this is your 4-gauge wire for your battery isolator coming back from that circuit breaker forward, and then this is a 2-strand Anchor wire. Basically, I'm just using one of those wires for the exciter of the battery isolator to kick the isolator on to show voltage. And I ran those through, and then they go right into the box there through rubber grommets. And one of the wires on the exciter, it's just 2-strand. I just figured an extra wire back here for, you know, whatever. It's always nice to have an extra wire ran to use later on. And here we are in the box of joy, I guess we could call it. We have the wires coming through. We'll start with the isolator wire. Basically, this is the isolator in 4-gauge going to the isolator. We have a 130 amp Sure Power isolator. Sure Power, I think, is owned by Cooper Busman now. And I went with 130 amp isolator also. It's 1 alternator, 3 batteries out. So the system can be added to. I can add another battery to it, which is always a good idea. Just, you know, always want to be able to build upon things. And so the alternator wire, or the isolator wire from the alternator, comes to the battery isolator. And then what it does is it goes to, I have 200, it tees out of the post off the isolator. It goes to 130 amp manual trip breakers, and then when it goes from those, it goes in those, goes out those, and then from those it goes to each battery. So each battery is charging. So basically, whenever the truck's running, each battery is charging all the time. There is doesn't have anything to do with anything else as far as charging goes. They're always going to be charging, so you don't really have to worry about much other than if your truck runs, alternator works. This isolator system, it will charge. What else we have on these batteries is I just got my grounds jumped together, and then I got one ground going across, main ground going to a stud, and then there's another main, and that from that stud it goes, you have your ground that goes to the chassis or to the engine block. And then I also have another ground that goes to this accessory block here, which is just a power and ground accessory block. There's the accessory bus bar. It comes off the switch, which can be turned on and off. So basically all your accessories for this truck should be ran out of this box. I've got one module, accessory module up front, which we'll talk about at a different time. So basically it's completely isolated from any electrical from the rest of your truck, so keeps one from getting in trouble and trying to splice into factory wires. Like I say, I think that's everything in this box that I can tell you about. Dual Odyssey 1200s. I'm running dual switches. I can combine the batteries, run off just one battery, or vice versa. And I've run dual Odyssey 1200s, and this system is capable of supporting a 3rd battery for, you know, a camper, a trailer, or whatever you want to do. And I think that's all I got here in the box of joy.